Welcome back to week 8 of Free Tendies Fantasy. We are here for the head coach episode. I'm here with Yanni. How's it going, man?
What's up, buddy?
Enough pussyfooting. Let's just get into it. And I'll start first. We have the Vikings going into LA to play the Rams. The Vikings have an implied team total of 25.75, and the Rams have an implied team total of 22.75. We have removed Jimmy as the picture of the Rams. Congratulations, you guys have earned your logo back. Don't trade Stafford, or we will put Jimmy right back on there. For the Vikings, we are starting Justin Jefferson, Aaron Jones, and Sam Darnold. We're sitting TJ Hawkinson if he goes, and we're tricky decisioning Jordan Addison. Then for the Rams, we're starting Kyron Williams and Cooper Kupp. We are sitting Matt Stafford, and we are tricky decisioning Colby Parkinson, Tutu Atwell, and Jordan Whittington. So let's start with the Vikings first. I think that's a little bit easier to break down. Aaron Jones is a surprise active last week, or I guess on Sunday against the Lions, and he almost kind of pivoted the game towards the Vikings sneaking out a win there against Detroit. This is a much softer Rams defense. He should just have his way with them. That's the same thinking with Darnold too, right? Like he's not a locked and loaded QB1, but in a soft matchup like this, absolutely. Justin Jefferson is a no-brainer. TJ Hawkinson, he had his 21-day practice window open last week. He missed Sunday, and it seems like he's trending towards not playing in this one. If he does go, though, we're gonna sit him. It's just it's probably a little bit too early off of the injury. We just kind of want to wait and see what he does before rolling him out with confidence. And then Jordan Addison, just another piece of this offense. If you like the Vikings offense, if you like their chances this week, you could roll out Jordan Addison. He's kind of been hit or miss the past couple weeks. It just really depends. I would almost lean towards a start this week. It just depends on your roster or whatever, but I think he's definitely in the flex conversation here. Then for the Rams, they've kind of been a little loud this week in terms of trade talks. They're talking about shipping Cooper Kupp out of town. I heard some Matthew Stafford to the Vikings conversation. I'm sure that was not true, but it's out there. So at least the idea is that this Rams team is kind of punting on the year and kind of selling. But we are still starting Kyron Williams. Don't love the player, love the opportunity. It's like he's just going to get touches and he's going to get high value touches every single week. He is an unavoidable RB1. And then we're putting Cooper Kupp as a start. It looks like it's going to be his first game back from injury. They're typically we aren't as aggressive with telling you to start wide receivers coming back from injury, a multi-week injury like Kupp had. But if these talks are true, right, and the Rams are shopping him, this is like the showcase game, right? This is the game where they target him a bunch of times, say, "Hey, look what you can buy," and then a team might bid on him, maybe even bid a first rounder. We are sitting Stafford just simply because the Vikings matchup. I don't love the Vikings as a defensive unit, but I mean Flores has performed really well this year. They've given quarterbacks a hard time. The Rams just kind of are in shambles a little bit, so it'd be a tough week for him. And then just all of the B passing options, right? The extra passing options in Parkinson, Tutu, Whittington. You could take your shot on him, right? If the Vikings go up big here, there's definitely a chance that they get some garbage time yards, garbage time touchdowns, even. I think out of those guys, I think Whittington actually goosed last week. I would say I like Whittington the most, but with that goose, I'm not even sure anymore. I kind of view them all as like lower end options at their position. Like you can do it if you're desperate, but I don't love the start in and for any of those three guys. Have anything you wanted to add to this one?
Just briefly about Tutu and Whittington. Tutu Atwell took Whittington's role last week because they did the inactive thing with him. He had the shoulder injury and they basically fake made him active, right? Where he was active, but he took no snaps. So, and Sean talked about that after the game. I would just say overall, I think Whittington is the one you want to be holding from that offense. I think if Cup moves, it'll be Whittington and Puka because Puka's window just opened for his injury. And as Tutu showed last week, and the reason that you might have seen him getting picked up off your waivers, even the wide receiver too, there's going to be productive, right? So if Cup moves, I think you do want to be holding Whittington. So keep that in mind. But for this week, you probably don't want to be starting either one.
Yeah, and to your point, right? If Cup is out of town here, which by the way would be insane. Like he's been such a good Ram, I would be shocked if they move a guy like that that's just so important to the history of their franchise. But if that does happen, Puka's on league winner watch, man. If he comes back from this injury and like is just the target monster that he was when Cup was missing last year and just kind of all of last year, really. Man, I would try and pick it managers for Puka if you can before it's too late.
Okay, Cardinals at Dolphins, what should hypothetically be a really exciting game now that Tua's back. Wishing Tua all the best, especially for fantasy. It's great, but just as a player and team, it's more fun when the Dolphins are rolling. Cardinals implied team total at 21 and a half at the Dolphins with an implied team total at 25. If you look at projected fantasy points, if you look at Vegas over-unders, they are assuming Tua is a full go this week, and he has been practicing in full this week, so he's in. For the Cardinals, it's kind of looked like this all year, really. And I know MHJ's had his up and downs. Kyler missed him on what would have been a 70-yard double move route. He was easily 15 yards behind the closest defender and Kyler was rolling toward him. He just missed him, unfortunately, right? But we are still starting MHJ with confidence, and it looks like going forward, his schedule lightens up a lot. They have the bye week to integrate the rookie more properly. I'm still all in on the kid. Kyler's been a really nice pickup. If you got him in the 6th, 7th round, you're feeling pretty good actually about him as far as just quarterbacks this year. He's been solid. You're starting him every week. McBride, a little disappointing on the year. He's had his injuries, but again, still a weekly start, still getting the volume. Hopefully some touchdown regressions coming. He has not been a touchdown monster, and he really wasn't in college either. So maybe it's fair to wonder if touchdowns just aren't going to be the thing that he does. He's been a little bit disappointing for some of the places where he went this year. If you got him more at the 5-6 turn, you're probably chilling. You're starting him though either way. Same with Connor. Connor's an Iron Man, beat cancer, just one of the most reliable players in the league. I love James Conner as like I don't know, just a story and a person. He's an animal, dude. And he's super consistent. He has a hold on that backfield. This is a good matchup. I know the Dolphins defense has actually been pretty good, but it should be high scoring. He should have more than enough chances to get his this week. And generally, and probably moving forward, please don't be messing around with other Cardinals receivers. Wilson's a nice player. The Human Dorch is a cool player, man. These are cool players. They're good little pieces to have. They're good football players. They are not valid fantasy assets. Don't waste a roster spot, and certainly don't start them or sit them. For the Dolphins, again, this is pretty par for the course, right? Tua, Hill, Waddle, A-Chain. The Jonnu Smith, the tight end, did not do as well with Tua as he did without Tua. He's we're treating him like he's not a relevant fantasy asset for now. That's why he's not listed. If he has one or two good games with Tua, maybe you pick him up. But for now, he's just not on your radar. He shouldn't really be on your roster. And then our sort of tricky decision from this game is going to be Mostert. Mostert actually had 11 carries for 50 yards last week before he fumbled. Pretty good, right? Almost a 5-yard per carry average. And there's still some discussion about who's going to get those red zone touches, who's going to get the goal line work. And with Tua back, that goal line work should be extremely lucrative for the Dolphins. I know A-Chain took it week 1, but also Mostert got a little banged up in that week. We just don't know. If he's averaging almost 5 yards a carry again this week, he's certainly a relevant fantasy asset. He'll probably be a low-end flex on that radar. If he gets red zone work, he could be a low-end RB2. We just don't know yet. So for this week, good matchup. I would hope you have better options for flex, but certainly not the worst.
Yeah, I mean, I think encouraging sign for A-Chain owners last week, right? We finally had Mostert and A-Chain stay healthy for an entire game. Granted, it was against the Indianapolis Colts, but A-Chain had more touches than Mostert. That's kind of been what I've been looking for, right? So if you think that Tua is going to come back without his guardian cap and be healthy and not get concussed again and still be able to orchestrate the offense, A-Chain owners might be in business. We'll see. It's just kind of, Mostert's not going away. That's why I kind of fought to have him as a tricky decision, or at least list him out separately. And then just for Marvin Harrison Jr. owners, just be patient. Right now, it's not his fault, I don't think. I really just think Kyler has struggled to sustain his weapons right now. To Yanni's point, like he missed him on a long one last week. I think that Kyler, it's still on the board that he kind of starts playing better. It's been a little bit disappointing for him this year. He's gotten you there on the rushing upside, but yeah, I would be buying Marvin Harrison Jr. I would not be shying away from this matchup. I know that Jalen Ramsey is on the Dolphins, right? But he's far and away the wide receiver one on the team. Might as well. I don't hate him, right? So just chill out, Marvin Harrison owners. All right, next we got the Jets going into New England to play the Patriots for a second time. The Jets have an implied team total of 24.5 points. The Patriots have an implied team total of 17.25 points. For the Jets, we're starting Breece Hall and Garrett Wilson. We are sitting Tyler Conklin and Alan Lazard, and we are tricky decisioning Aaron Rodgers and Devontae Adams. Then for the Patriots, we're starting Drake May. Welcome to Start Calling Brother, and Ramondre Stevenson. Then we're tricky decisioning Hunter Henry and Pop Douglas. So let's start with the Jets first. Obviously, they're coming off a disappointing ass kicking at the hands of the Pittsburgh Steelers. That cost me about $200 in my pick'em league. I was winning. The only one I really had wrong was I had the Jets beating the Steelers. We missed that in consensus on the gambling show last week. I was shocked at how bad the Jets looked. I think that it's important to note, right? Like they have an interim head coach now. They fired their head coach, and just because they got Devonte Adams in a trade does not mean that connection is going to be the same as it was back in Green Bay. And there's no guarantee that Aaron Rodgers will look like the old Aaron Rodgers that we know, right? Like it could just be over for him. This could be his last year. But that being said, let's just pump the brakes on Devontae. Let's see what happens. I would be cautiously optimistic holding him, but it's just like, let's see a big week first before we call him a full blown start. And then for Brees Hall, Garrett Wilson, right? They finally started to produce for you a little bit more. It's got to feel good. I would just temper expectations, but this is a very gettable matchup against the Patriots, who haven't really stopped anyone. So fire them up. Then for the Patriots, I think that we've seen weeks of Drake May already, and I think that he has breathed life into this Patriots team. It's not to say they're going to be a good team. This is not that at all, but this is kind of like when Andy Dalton took over for the Panthers to me, in the sense that he is making these fantasy assets around him and the offense not just completely unwatchable. Went over 20 points the last 2 weeks, and we are starting him against a Jets team that just got torched by Russell Wilson. On that note, too, Ramondre, still a good football player. This Patriots team still wants to hammer the rock when they can. The Jets haven't been great in rush defense. It's a good spot for him. It's not a sit spot. And then Hunter Henry and Pop Douglas is tricky decisions. These two have popped up over the last 2 weeks as being the target leaders. Who will be the true number one is kind of hard to say. I probably lean a little bit more towards Henry, just being like a tight end one that is also the pass catcher one in this offense. But I think there's a reason to start them. We had Hunter Henry on our free agent episode this week. Pop Douglas, he's popped up on the free agent episode other weeks. Get him on your rosters. I would think about it. This is not the spooky Jets defense that we have once known and loved. Got anything to add on to this?
No, I love your May bullishness, man. That's all. When we went over this, I had May more as a sort of tricky decision. Ted goes, "No, man, that's a start." And I think you'll end up being right. Actually, I think that's the right call. I think May is probably a must add in most leagues, especially if you're a 2 QB roster.
I mean, if you look at the way the rookie quarterbacks have played this year, right? They have like cumulatively one of the best records that a batch of rookie quarterbacks has ever had, and they all
Yep.
struggled right out of the gate, right? Like it took Caleb until week 3 to throw a touchdown, right? It took Jaden until week
Yep.
3 to throw a touchdown. Drake May has come out here and had 2 multi-touchdown games in a row, like right off the bat. So I don't know, man. On a much worse roster too, mind you, right? This Patriots team is just not very good. I'm really encouraged by what I'm seeing from the kid. If you're a Patriots fan, there's at least a silver lining on this season. Nobody thought you would be good, but something to cheer for.
Dude, I had JJ McCarthy miles ahead of May and Nix, and he hasn't even played this year. JJ McCarthy, in my opinion, is a significantly better quarterback than both of them. I think it's a fundamentally transformative quarterback class for the NFL. Eagles at the Bengals. Eagles with an implied team total of 23, which is pretty shocking, so much so that we just double checked our numbers here. And Bengals with an implied team total of 24 and a half. For the Eagles, look, man, pretty straightforward. This is a league-winning fantasy offense. You are starting every single piece of it where you can, not the wide receiver 3, obviously. You're starting your Hurts, you're starting your Smith, you're starting your AJ Brown, Saquon. Have to feel great if you drafted Saquon and didn't listen to the efficiency metrics, guys. And then the tight end, even in this matchup specifically, I think Goddard's coming back. I'm not sure. I haven't looked into that, but I believe he is. Goddard is actually a fine start, man. He's a fine low-end tight end one that has mid-range tight end one upside. Start all your Eagles. Start them confidently. Start them for the rest of the year. And then for the Bengals, Burrow, Chase, Higgins, Brown. It looks like we're getting some clarity in that backfield. I'm hesitant to say definitely because Moss had that really gnarly, what looked like a high ankle or something, or like a bad foot sprain. Then he played. I don't know if it's Moss being unhealthy or if it's that Brown has looked so much better, but Brown is the much more efficient running back. He's the much more explosive running back. It seems like he's getting a degree of trust in pass blocking. That's where Moss has a huge edge over him. It's just hard to say, right? Did he have the backfield, or did the injury affect a couple weeks of usage? I'm somewhere in between on it, but for now, I think you're starting Brown, and Moss is just an emergency depth piece on your bench. For that reason, Moss and the tight ends are sits. I know the fantasy community too. I keep seeing him flirt with, like, in the beginning of the year, it was, well, we need to start Gesicki or get to Gesicki on there. He was on some ad list. And then All Junior has had actually really good metrics in a few different areas. So people are like, we need to get All Junior. To me, this is just a mess because they're all eating into each other's workload. And unless one of them has clarity there, I don't know why you would be rostering or potentially starting a Bengals tight end. They're all good football players. They're cool for what the Bengals do on the field, but fantasy is not real football directly. Also, if that number stays the same, hammer the Eagles this week, guys. Hammer the Eagles this week.
All right, next we got the Packers going into Jacksonville to play the Jaguars. The Packers have an implied team total of 26.5 points, and the Jaguars have an implied team total of 22 points. For the Packers, we're starting Jordan Love, Josh Jacobs, Tucker Kraft, Jaden Reed, sorry, and Romeo Dobbs. We're sitting Christian Watson, and we are tricky decisioning Dontavian Wicks. Then for the Jaguars, we're starting Tank Bigsby, Brian Thomas Jr., and Evan Ingram. We're sitting Christian Kirk and Travis Etienne, Bust Watch, and we're tricky decisioning Trevor Lawrence. So let's start with the Jaguars first. Coming off an impressive win last week against the Patriots, I mean, it's hard not to look impressive against the Patriots at this point in time, but I think we learned some things about Jacksonville here. Trevor Lawrence has quietly put together 2 nice weeks in a row. I don't think that he's the player that we thought he would be 2 years ago, right? I still think he's working through his issues. I still think the Jaguars are a mess, but this Packers team, they do allow a lot of yards. They kind of live off the turnover. I would not be shocked to see Trevor throw a pick or two here, but especially like chasing a lead, I could absolutely see Trevor putting up some fantasy points here. So that's why he's a tricky decision. Christian Kirk has just kind of looked toast ever since Evan Ingram has come back. Evan Ingram is taking over those short to intermediate routes, that middle of the field type of stuff that Christian Kirk has been eating in. He just kind of feels lost on this offense. And then ETN, I guess we can also talk about Tank Bigsby too here, right? It looks like he's losing his job to Tank Bigsby, which is insane coming off 2 1,500-yard seasons in a row, right? Locked in, like, awesome fantasy option the last 2 years. He was going in the second to third round of drafts. Now he's just irrelevant, which is crazy. I get that he's been battling injury this year. I think it's just been a weird year all around for the Jaguars. I would look for them to maybe move him at the deadline. If they are going to move him at the deadline, maybe he gets a couple touches here. They try and showcase him a little bit, but we're not starting to over Tank Bigsby at this point, that's for sure. Brian Thomas Jr., I believe he's like top 10 in fantasy wide receiver scoring this year. One of the best mid-round picks you could have had. This is probably Brian Thomas has got to be like the bright spot of this Jaguar season so far. And then Evan Ingram coming back to action, putting up a 100-yard game as a tight end. That's got to feel great. I don't see it being like that every week. They aren't going to be able to pass at will, I don't think, against a lot of teams. But this Packers team does hemorrhage yards a little bit. So we like him as a start here. You need to find 12 startable tight ends in fantasy football, right? And Evan Ingram is certainly one of them, and I would feel better about him than some other tight end ones. Then for the Packers, Jordan Love, the arsonist, got away with another one last week against the Texans. He does this every week. He throws some of the dumbest picks that you've ever seen, right? His decision making is questionable at best. But the guy is a gunslinger. He throws the ball down the field and he scores fantasy points. Fantasy points don't care about how good you actually are as a quarterback. So he is just a locked-in start here. And this Packers offense as a whole is just live with him running it, right? It's not a boring type of Will Levis offense. Josh Jacobs, he's finally kind of been getting in the end zone here. I know the first 3 weeks of the season, he had like the most touches without a touchdown or whatever, the most like expected fantasy points. That's finally regressing here. You're finally seeing Josh Jacobs perform for you, kind of at his ADP. Tucker Kraft, in a tight end wasteland, he has gotten there 2 out of 3 weeks, good enough to be a start against the ranked last pass defense in the league. Same with Jaden Reed and Romeo Dobbs. Jaden Reed, he had a bad week last week. I think it's just going to happen on this Packers team. Like we've said before, there's a lot of mouths to feed on the Green Bay Packers. Sometimes some of these guys just aren't going to get there on a given week. But again, this is an attackable matchup. I have him ranked far and away as the wide receiver one in this offense, or the fantasy wide receiver one, and that's who you really want. And then Romeo Dobbs, he's gotten home the last 2 weeks. There was all the talk about how unhappy he was in Green Bay, how unhappy he was with his opportunity and the coaching staff. There was the weird video of him refusing to like shake Matt LaFleur's hand, and since that came out, he's been balling in fantasy startable. Do I think he's the best wide receiver? Do I think he's one of the two best wide receivers on the Green Bay Packers? No, I don't. I think Christian Watson's a better player. I think Jaden Reed's a better player. But if he's going to be running a lot of routes and he's going to be getting targets, then you got to start him in this attackable matchup. Christian Watson is a sit. He popped up on the injury report again this week. I would assume he's going to play in this game, but honestly, just with the way it's gone so far, I want to see production with him before I would recommend him as anything other than a sit. And then Dontavian Wicks, tricky decision. He is there because I don't know, like he's an ancillary piece of the offense, right? Do you think that Romeo Dobbs is going to be on the field the entire time? Is Romeo Dobbs going to be running all the routes, right? I don't think he will be. I think he'll run more routes than Wicks, but I think Wicks is probably a more dynamic player. Again, in this Jordan Love Packers offense, you're looking to get a guy who gets a long touchdown or gets home. Everyone's kind of live, so I think he's worthy of at least a tricky decision here. Thoughts on this one, Yanni?
Just bummed about Watson, man. But look, the whole thesis with taking Watson this offseason, he was kind of a fantasy darling in some circles. The whole thought about taking him was he had a 24.5% target share with Jordan Love as quarterback, and he was averaging like over a touchdown a game in games he had finished in the NFL. So it was actually an argument that he was going to get usage and operate as like their X receiver and be a red zone target, right? We're seeing them really diversify. We're seeing Romeo Dobbs eat into those end zone targets. We're seeing Jacobs get fed in the end zone. Tucker Kraft is breaking out. And just generally, Wicks has come along, right? The offense is very diffused. And so I love Watson as a player, probably irrationally, like probably more than most people, and not the most rational take, right? I'm a fan of the kid. But I think we have to be realistic about what we're seeing. And that was probably a bum pick, especially going in ranges of guys like Brian Thomas Jr., you know. So yeah, that's it.
Yeah, this is really kind of the Yanni disappointment bowl here with Christian Watson and ETN in the same game. I drafted one share of ETN, but I got off him for Bucky Irving. I got draft capital for that trade at the time I was tanking, but now it just kind of looks like I might have gotten the better side of that trade, at least for now until ETN gets moved. We will see though.
Yeah. Okay, Falcons and Bucks. Probably going to be a less explosive game than their last matchup, but extremely important for how this division is going to shape up, even with the Buccaneers injuries. Falcons implied team total of 24 at the Buccaneers with an implied team total of 21.5. The Falcons are pretty straightforward, man. Congratulations, Bijan owners. Finally, I drafted him at pick 7 or 8 last year. I took him over Tyreek Hill last year. Big mistake. But he, again, this year, he went picks anywhere from 3 to 5 in most of my drafts. Okay. It was a really tough beginning with his hamstring injury and with all this stuff, but it looks like what they were doing was actually throttling him down out of a concern for an overabundance of caution. The last 2 weeks, all of a sudden, he's really exploded both in usage and like key moment usage, passing down work. There was a stat that they were only running him to the outside. It looks like they've tried to vary his runs that he's getting a little bit more. And all of a sudden, he's getting these 20-point chunky games, over 20-point chunky games in half PPR. It's awesome. It's what you drafted Bijan for. It's great to see. I'd feel really good about that. I hope you bought low when guys like us were telling you buy low on him. The market's too low. Probably too late now. And then Drake London, look, pretty straightforward. Drake London, not a lot to say. Giant target share. Kirk Cousins lead receiver. It's a good position to be in. Christian Kirk, Kyle Pitts. Kyle Pitts, I believe, is on a 3 or 4 week streak of at least 5 receptions and over 50 yards. In fantasy, that is an elite tight end asset. Roll him out there. I'm not a fan of the player. Well, not a fan. I've been sort of a hater of him compared to community sentiment, but this week he's absolutely a start. Probably the rest of the season he's a start. Kirk Cousins, we're going to target matchups like this, high-scoring matchups where he's going to have to air the ball out. I think it's perfectly reasonable to start him this week, depending on what your options are. And then your sort of tricky decisions are going to be your two outside pieces from this team, the two guys that sort of slot in. I don't think you want to be starting Algier while Bijan is getting the type of usage that he's getting right now. He's getting fantastic usage. I would probably be benching Algier, but if you need an emergency start, there's a good chance he's going to get his 10 to 12 touches. Maybe he gets a red zone touch. Like I'm talking, zero RB rosters that are looking for those guys. He's a reasonable emergency start if you really need him. And then Mooney, been consistent all year, a little bit up and down just recently. Still like him as a player, still like him as an asset. In any game where they're liable to go for 3 or 4 touchdowns, more like 4 in this game, probably even more. Again, low end flex, probably closer to a sit than a flex for me this week, but I could see rosters where you're going to have to start him. Injuries are brutal right now. The Buccaneers is where this is a little more opinionated and a little tricky, and I'm willing to go out on a limb here. Me and Ted went back and forth about it a little bit. We're both big Bucky fans. Ted is the bigger Bucky fan, required legally to say that. But here's the deal. No Evans and no Godwin. We feel like McMillan is the receiver you want to be starting there. I saw Sterling Shepard getting a lot of pickups in leagues I'm in, and Sterling Shepard's a good enough receiver. He's actually had some red zone targets this year. I just think overall they drafted McMillan, and McMillan's flashed this year, and they've held him out when he got injured because they wanted to make sure he was totally healthy. I think you went and drafted McMillan for this exact moment. You have 2 aging receivers, even though Mike Evans has been an Iron Man, Chris Godwin is not. They knew at some point in the year they might have to start McMillan. They got him for this, okay, for this. And the Falcons have been gettable just in terms of getting in these weird shootouts where all of a sudden it's a scoring fest, or at least all of a sudden the ball's being moved left and right. I think it's a really good matchup to start McMillan, and I'm doing so confidently. And I'm doing so with Kate Otten as well. I begged you guys to go and get him off the wire this week. I think he's an excellent fantasy player, man, for the rest of the season. I really do. I think he's going to potentially end up influencing some leagues down the road here, especially for tight end zero rosters. I think that starts this week. I think you can expect a really healthy target share from him, especially in PPR. I think he's going to be a really nice, healthy start. And then speaking of, especially in PPR, but in general, it turns out White is not dead. Old White, not a very talented running back, man. I think he averages like 2 point something yards per carry. I think it might be low 2s per carry. He hit a lower speed on his 55-yard run this year than the D tackle did in the Saints game that intercepted the ball and ran it back. It's just he's a bizarrely unathletic running back in the NFL, but he gets fed volume. Now the volume on the ground has gone away, but what hasn't gone away is the receiving usage. Okay. And he's actually very efficient as a receiver, kind of leaking out and doing those, little 6 to 12-yard chunk plays out of the backfield. We saw that again this week against the Ravens, where he kind of went off a little bit. I think he had 16, 18, under 20, but over 15, somewhere in there. Now, Bucky did too, actually, and in full PPR. Bucky also is in that range. My feeling is that in games where they're trailing, or when it's not a neutral game script or a positive game script for the running game, I think White is going to be the guy that's getting more work. So in a game like this, I think he's going to get a lot of receptions, and especially without Goodwin and Evans the next 3 weeks, I actually think White is going to be a great start for the most part. Is he going to be what you drafted him to be? Probably not. Probably not. He's not getting the third in the NFL usage he got last year. But I think we're going to switch him. You're going to see Bucky on starts and White on tricky decisions as we go forward here. But for this week, I think White is a start. And on that note, Bucky is going to be our sort of tricky decision in the backfield, and then Baker Mayfield. Baker is, I believe, either the QB 1 or 2. I think he's 2 behind Lamar this year in fantasy output. He's been wonderful, man. If you went and grabbed him off the wire, you've been enjoying him. I've had him in 2 leagues. I've been trying to trade him like crazy. I'm maybe not the worst time to do that. But so I had him as a sit initially. Ted goes, dude, we cannot sit Baker Mayfield. He's been too good. He's looked too good. And he called out that the Falcons have not generated a proper pass rush this year, which I think is true. So if Baker can sit back in the pocket and they still have enough weaponry, obviously Godwin and Evans, man, it's hard to say they're not missing a serious chunk of what this team is. But they do have enough guys that should go out there and move the ball enough. And Baker's looked so good this year, and I think they run up the lean on the rush game a little more. Maybe you look for him to be a little more efficient this week, get those touchdowns, and still keep up that 18 to 20 point per game fantasy range. He's a little higher than that right now, but I think it's realistic to 18 to 20 on his high-end games now for the rest of the year. So tricky decision for Baker.
Yeah, a couple notes here. Bucky did pop up on the injury report this week. I don't know how serious it is, but just monitor that. Fantasy managers going in. If Bucky misses, I would feel fine sliding Sean Tucker right into where Bucky is as a tricky decision. White is still probably the guy you want here. And then other note, this is the rematch of the great Thursday night football game, or that we had. It was probably the game of the year almost, where Kirk came back. So we'll see, man. This Buccaneers team has given up almost like 100 points over the past 3 weeks. It does not look good for them. I think this might be a Falcons smash here, with the Buccaneers missing the heart and soul of their team. It's really up to Baker, right? Like, that's why we tricky decisioned him. Like, he's been so good this year, but it's a tough task here, right? He's kind of at Brock Purdy levels of missing weapons and kind of needing to put the team on his back. We'll see how he performs here. But bet the Falcons. All right, next we got the Baltimore Ravens going into Cleveland to play the newly led Jameis Winston Browns. I love that picture. I love the Jameis crab picture. If you know, you know about the crab legs. The Ravens have an applied team total of 27 points, and the Browns have an applied team total of 17 and a half points. So Vegas doesn't have as much faith in Jameis as I do, I guess, in this one. For the Ravens, we're starting Lamar Jackson, Derrick Henry, and Mark Andrews. We're sitting Zay Flowers if he goes, and then we're tricky decisioning Rashad Bateman and Isaiah Likely. Then for the Browns, we are starting David Njoku and Jerry Jeudy. We are tricky decisioning famous Jameis, and we're sitting the rest. So we'll start with the Ravens here first. This is very simple. Lamar and Derrick Henry, they look like the number one players at their position. I'm actually in a league this year with a family friend, I guess almost stepbrother, who drafted basically the entire Ravens team. He drafted Lamar, Henry, Justin Tucker, and the kicker. And when me and Yanni were looking at his roster, we were like, what is this guy doing? They're going to be eating off each other's plates. As it turns out, drafting a bunch of players in this offense is a good thing. And they're looking to lead their positions this year in fantasy scoring. They're just no brainers. Mark Andrews, he's finally put together 2 good weeks here. It's not Listen, we will tell you to sit Mark Andrews or tricky decision Mark Andrews if we feel like there's a game where Lamar Jackson's only dropping back like 16 to 18 times, like he has done twice this year against the Cowboys and I forgot who else it was, but he looks good. He's not a dead player. Start him against this team. It should be a blowout for the Ravens here. We're sitting Zay Flowers. He had the ankle on Monday night. After he had the ankle pop up, he didn't get another touch in the game. Fact of the matter is, he has a DMP this week. He might not play. It just doesn't feel. I would be shocked if the Ravens roll him out here. I would give him another week of rest if I were them. It shouldn't be close. And then a tricky decision: Rashad Bateman and Isaiah Likely. Rashad Bateman, if Zay Flowers is out, he's going to be operating as the wide receiver one, and that's worth something in this offense. He is not the type of player Zay Flowers is, but he's a fast guy. He can break one off. And then on that note, right, if Zay Flowers is missing, I think that Isaiah Likely will be getting some looks here. Do I like him more as a tight end than Mark Andrews? Absolutely not. That's why he's a tricky decision, and Mark Andrews is a start. But like him enough to be on the field. He could easily get into the end zone here. You could do worse at the tight end position. Then for the Browns, we'll see what this looks like. Obviously, Tug tore his Achilles last week. It was like Thanos snapping him. Like every week, Kevin Stefanski went out there after seeing the worst football you could possibly see, right? And he goes, Deshaun Watson's still our starter. Deshaun Watson's still our starter. And then God said, watch this. And God just went, and he zapped his Achilles. So who knows? This could be a good thing for the Cleveland Browns. I don't think it could have gotten much worse in that locker room. We're starting David Njoku and Jerry Jeudy now that Amari Cooper's out, right? Like they're going to be target monsters. If this Browns team is going to have any success here, it's going to be feeding them specifically. I think Njoku's on league winner watch here at the tight end position that is so dry. And Jerry Jeudy has somehow found himself as the wide receiver one on a football team again. I don't know. I think he's probably just another guy, right? He's just a jag, but if he's getting peppered with Jameis targets, why not? And on that note, right? Famous Jameis, tricky decision. Listen, this Ravens team is a very good football team. I don't think this game will be close, but the Ravens have a pretty bad pass defense. They have this tendency to give up a lot of yards and points in garbage time. I think Jameis is going to see the deep ball and just get aggressive and throw it. He could easily have a 4 interception game here, but if he can get 2 or 3 touchdowns, it might even out. I think you could do worse, especially in Superflex. In one league this week, I had Andy Dalton get in a car crash and he's out. So I am rolling out famous Jameis with the utmost confidence that he can at least do what Andy Dalton was doing for me this week in a spot start. Any thoughts on this one, Yanni? I know you're a Jameis guy.
Well, I love Jameis like as a person and actually as a player. But I think going forward, he's a perfectly fine start. I do think he's going to struggle a little bit here as it's his first start in however long, and it's a very tough start, man. Even though it's at home, that's a very tough game to get thrown in there on. We'll see. I'm rooting for him. And then just briefly about the running backs, you'll notice that Chubb is not listed on here. I don't think you want to be starting Chubb this week. I would sincerely hope you have better options than to start Chubb this week. And look, he averaged 2 yards a carry. He looked clearly hobbled last week. It'll be interesting to see what the usage is. I don't know where Ford is at coming back. They didn't put him on IR, and he's already missed a couple games, maybe even 3 games. So I think he may be back this week, if not next week. It'll be interesting to see what the usage looks like. But look, for now, guys, please don't start Chubb.
Yeah,
Love the player. Not healthy. Not ready yet.
it is a murky backfield going against the number 1 rush defense in the
Yeah.
NFL. They have not allowed over a 50-yard rusher, I want to say, all year. This is not the spot for Chubb. But I thought, listen, it was cool to see Chubb get all those carries. It's not something I had. It was not on my scorecard. That the Browns would come out and workhorse a guy whose knee was bent like a right angle. Just a year ago. He obviously doesn't look right yet. I think we're looking at probably next year when we start seeing at least a fraction of what Chubb was before.
Yep, that's exactly right. Okay, Colts at Texans, pretty important game for both teams, really. The Texans are looking at ascending into the elite of the elite, right, if they can keep this rolling here. Colts, 20.5 implied team total. Texans, 26-point implied team total. Colts are risking sliding into obscurity here if this keeps going. For the Colts, look, we had some back and forth, a little bit of consternation in the old free Tendies fantasy discussion board. But, what are we doing with these Colts players? Okay, well, we know what we're doing with the running back. And even if it's Goodson, by the way, we know what we're doing with the running back. Start Goodson or Jonathan Taylor with confidence every week. In my opinion, I saw enough out of Goodson when Jonathan Taylor was out that if JT misses, I'm instant starting Goodson. So if you have JT, I would highly recommend handcuffing him with Goodson. That way, you're going to have that start for the rest of the year. But look, it looks like JT will be back this week. If not, they should have just put him on IR. I know I keep using that as a reference point, but that to me, if they don't put them on IR and they've missed 2 to 3 games, they should be back before the 4th week, right? So Jonathan Taylor should be back this week. You're starting him. Here's where it gets murky, man. I think Anthony Richardson is averaging, he missed 1 game or 2 games in between there, but I believe his last 3 starts, he's averaging 6 to 7 points per game in fantasy. That is brutal, especially for where you drafted him, especially as him being the game-breaking, league-winning asset that he was billed to be this offseason. Me and Ted keep checking in with each other because I was a huge Anthony Richardson guy. I had him above Bryce Young in the draft. I would have taken CJ Stroud 1, Anthony Richardson 2. And that was sort of a hot take at the time. And I still believe in the player. I think he needs a year or 2 to develop. I think when you make that pick, you make it knowing he needs a year or 2 to develop. But it gets really messy when you have a team like the Colts that was a play away from the playoffs last year. And in a lot of ways, their head coach and their roster are sort of playoff ready. And then all of a sudden you get this really messy situation. Their defense falls off. What are we doing with that, right? We're calling them all tricky decisions. Anthony Richardson, Pittman, Downs, Pierce. These are guys that for me are much closer to sits than potential plays, but there are going to be rosters where you're just going to need to do it, right? I prefer personally, Ted can weigh in at the end what he prefers. I prefer Pittman, Downs, Pierce when Richardson's playing. Pittman gets the target share, so he's going to be the one that I'm rolling, and it's going to be in that order. And Pierce is strictly an emergency start that I never really want to play with Anthony Richardson. And with Anthony Richardson, I am starting almost every QB2 if I have them on my roster over him. So, I mean, if I have Geno Smith, I'm starting him over Pittman. If I have Russell Wilson, I'm starting him over Pittman. If I have Baker Mayfield, I'm starting him over Pittman. Sam Darnold. I cannot believe that is the case, but in my opinion, that is where we're at. Again, I'll let Ted weigh in when I'm done here. And then for the Texans, pretty straightforward. Okay, CJ Stroud's the fucking man. CJ Stroud is awesome. I love watching CJ Stroud play football. As a man and as a football player, dude, for him being 10 years younger than me, it just shames me because he's amazing. Huge fan. And Diggs, Dell, Mixon. 2 DFS smash plays we're flagging here just because this Colts defense has been so damn soft. Diggs seems like he's due for some positive regression, hopefully a touchdown in this game, okay? Mixon, amazing player this year, just been going off and really been good his whole career, actually, for the most part. But really blossoming behind a highly functional team, probably the best football team he's been on in his career, except for the Super Bowl team with the Bengals. So you're starting all of them. You're starting all of them happily, and try to get one or two of them in your DFS rosters if you can. I certainly don't mind. I don't know if I want to stack Stroud because he's usually a little overpriced considering he doesn't have the rushing upside, but I would be trying to get either Mixon or Diggs in my DFS rosters this week. And then Schultz just isn't seeing the volume, man. He was one of my favorite picks last year at tight end. I actually went heavy bags on Schultz. This year the offense is too diversified. Joe Mixon's eating up way too many touches, and I don't know. I probably would prefer to not even be rostering Schultz at this point. So that's where I'm at.
Yeah, I got a couple things on this one. At least for Joe Mixon, right? I don't know if it was just the matchup that they faced last week against the Green Bay Packers, who cannot stop the run. But to me, this Texans team without Nico Collins in there is looking like a Joe Mixon football team. It looks like a Joe Mixon centric football team. I'm shocked he's looked as good as he has. And this is a rematch of week one where he was the leading rusher on the week. I think that Joe Mixon RB1 on the week is on the table, as crazy as that seems. I really, really love him in this spot. And then I just can't believe you're doing this to Anthony Richardson. I can't believe it. You were the number one Richardson supporter and you're so quick to get out on him. Listen, boys, it can't get much worse from a passing perspective, but rushing upside is king. I believe he had 50 or 60 rush yards last week. He lost a fumble, so that was not good. Anthony Richardson is actually my quarterback one on my underdog roster, which is now out of the advance pool. I'm like 10 points behind having an advance. But I have faith he'll get better this year, man. There's no way he continues to be this bad. I just don't believe it. Even if he only marginally improves as a passer, the rushing upside is still there, right? Like if he takes it into the end zone, like he can score. Look at Justin Fields. He's not a good quarterback either, right? But that rushing upside and running the ball into the end zone, that gets you there in fantasy. So, I mean, with a team like the Colts, you have Shane Steichen as your offensive coordinator, right? He's got good pieces around him. Don't hate the player long term. I mean, if he's on your waivers, right? If you have some butthurt fantasy manager that dropped him after him missing 2 weeks and having a bad one, go get him, man. Throw him on the back of your bench. In his first 4 starts, right? Or maybe it was his first 6 starts. He hadn't finished outside of the fantasy quarterback 4 or something. He's had amazing showings. It's been like a weird regression year, but I think he's just learning, man. He's probably played like less than 30 total games as an NFL quarterback, or just as a quarterback in general, right? I think he only did 1 season at Florida. He only did 4 games last year. There's tons of room to grow for the guy. Just be patient with him, Colts. And by the way, Yanni, this Colts team is 4-3, winning record, buddy. Okay, they're not going into irrelevancy if they lose against the Texans. Still in the wild card hunt.
Maybe I'm being a little too harsh. Fair enough.
I mean, like they're total pretenders, right? Like let's not kid ourselves here. This Colts team with Anthony Richardson playing the way he is, they are pretending. But at least they can convince themselves they're in the
They're
conversation.
very well coached. They're
Yeah.
very well coached.
All right. At any rate, next game, the depressing Tennessee Titans are going into Detroit to play the Lions to get their asses kicked. The Titans have an implied team total of 17 points. That may be too high. The Lions have an implied team total of 27.5 points here. For the Titans, we are starting Tony Pollard and we are tricky decisioning Calvin Ridley. Those are the only 2 people on this fantasy team that are relevant and matter now that DeAndre Hopkins is gone. Then for the Lions, we're starting Amon-Ra here, we're starting Gibbs, and we're starting Monty. And then we're tricky decisioning Jared Goff. And surprise addition to the tricky decision list, I actually kind of insisted on this one, Sam Laporta. So we'll just go right into the Sam Laporta thing, right? This year, he has only eclipsed 10 points once, and that was on the flea flicker play where it was like a 50-yard touchdown on a flea flicker. Otherwise, the volume just has not been there for him. Jameson Williams, obviously, he got suspended this week. He's going to be out for the next 2 games. Guess he took a little Viagra, or it's either Viagra or performance-enhancing drugs. Doesn't really matter. He got popped on the substance abuse policy. He's going to be gone. So at least the theory, right, is the too many mouths to feed thing on the Lions, that's going to kind of benefit Sam Laporta. I do believe that to some extent. I think he will be more utilized than he has been so far, but this Titans team, they don't do a lot of good things well, but they play defense really well. They just shipped out Ernest Jones, the linebacker, to the Seahawks, so they'll be missing a body there. But I think this Titans team is still going to play tough. It's just, to me, this profiles as a game where the Lions probably go up early and just run the heck out of the ball. Just kind of play keep away, run the clock out, make this one be over quickly. I think they know this is not going to be competitive. I wouldn't I wouldn't expect to see many hook and ladders in this game. I wouldn't expect to see Dan Skipper split out wide in this one. I don't think it's that type of blowout that they did to the Cowboys, but I don't see this being competitive. God, it's just so disappointing for the Tennessee Titans, man. Will Levis being terrible at football has just tanked this entire season. Anyone who is drafting Titans players with the optimism that Will Levis would be in any way, shape, or form a decent football player, jokes on you. Other than Tony Pollard, I guess he's been money because he's all they got. Thoughts on this one?
Yeah, just normally without Jameis, Laporta certainly would be a start, but this is a rush funnel defense, and it's a game script that they're not going to need to pass a lot. And same thing with Jared Goff. Jared Goff's actually had a really nice last 2 to 3 weeks at quarterback. It's just this matchup. It's going to be very rush heavy. You can probably do a little better on 2 QB rosters with Jared Goff. And then the Viagra thing. That is a classic excuse used in combat sports, as they took discount or knockoff Viagra. And what they try to say is that the performance enhancing drugs weren't cleaned out of the vat properly of the cheap Viagra they took. That's why they popped. No, they popped because they were taking performance enhancing drugs. And God bless them, keep doing it. I love good football. Jameson Williams is awesome. I hope he keeps taking performance enhancing drugs. Just don't get caught, stupid.
You
All
don't
right,
think
now that's it.
You don't think Jameson Williams was like torqued for that -4 yard performance last week?
No, I don't think the 21-year-old physical specimen needs to get rocked up anymore. I'm sure he's having a great time. Performance enhancing drugs, dude. The 21-year-old athlete is not having blood flow issues. No, I
Oh,
don't think that.
and one more note for the fantasy managers, I guess. I have heard that you can't put suspended players in the IR spot. Apparently, let us know in the comments if you can, because I have Jameson on a roster. I need him in that IR spot as soon as possible.
Oh God. Okay. Saints at Chargers. Saints with an implied team total of 16.5. Chargers with an implied team total of 24. I think this is going to be an ugly, gross football game. But Jim Harbaugh loves ugly, gross football, man. That's where he thrives. And for the Saints, okay, pretty straightforward here. Derek Carr still in football limbo, as it were. Rashid Shaheed out for the year. There are only two assets on this team that you are going to look at going forward. And I actually think both should be perfectly fine for the rest of the season. I actually am bullish on Olave. I am sending offers on Olave, trying to buy on him. And I believe that'll start this week. He had a concussion. He missed a week from the concussion because of the short week. 19 out of 20 receivers that had 10 days to recover from the concussion protocol did clear it. So he should fall within that range, and he should have a lot less target competition, a lot less air yard share competition going forward. Olave is going to be the man in this offense, man. All that pre-snap motion that the Shanny system loves, that's all Olave. And yeah, I think he's going to be a very nice start for the rest of the season. I'm totally confident, and so much so that I'm trying to buy. And then Kamara, report that he's playing with a broken hand and broken ribs. Absolute animal. Got a $24 million contract extension. No idea why. Not because of the player, because of the state of the Saints. I have no idea why that's where they're dispensing money. That's where they're dispensing money. So Olave and Kamara, start them. No thank you to anyone else. Please sit them all. Little bit of a back and forth between me and Ted for J.K. Dobbins. Okay, J.K. Dobbins has had 3 smash weeks this year, and he's had, I believe their bye was in between there, so only 3 other weeks, maybe 4, but I think they've had a bye this year. I don't know. Do you know off the top of your head? I don't remember if they played 6 or 7.
Yeah, I think they already had their bye. I
They did
think.
have their bye because I went against a team with J.K. Dobbins out. So 50-50 shot, right? He had 2 smash games, but so here's my concern with Dobbins, and here's where our back and forth occurred. He in the last month has had 2 down performances, and then actually 3 down performances, and then the one game where he had the big run against the Broncos. That one big run at least made it so he's 1 out of 4 in the last month. If he doesn't break that, he's averaging like 6 to 7 yards a game for the last month, right? And I know, the if he doesn't break it thing, that's kind of right, silly to do. Big plays happen in sports. They're part of fantasy. It's kind of silly to try to say like, well, if he didn't have that, if players didn't have their big plays, yeah, they'd be worthless. I think generally there's been a trend of decline in Dobbins, and I think we're seeing Kamani Vidal get more work. I forget the other guy that they're working in there; it's some no-name guy, but he's getting work back there, and I just don't know. I don't know what it looks like, right? But the Saints are awful on defense, awful, and clearly Harbaugh is committed to J.K. Dobbins and committed to feeding the run game. So unless we see a serious trend, like, maybe if 2 more weeks, we get 6 weeks of data where he's only had one pop week and it was because of a big run, maybe we can really reevaluate Dobbins as a fantasy asset. For now, he's going to be a start because of the matchup. Just keep an eye on it, I would say. He was closer to a sort of tricky decision for me. But Ted rightly pointed out how teams have performed against the Saints, how Harbaugh's committed to the run. I think that's all correct. I just that's kind of where I'm at with Dobbins. Sort of tricky decision. Herbert had a 300-yard game throwing to Foot Locker salesman. Extremely impressive, man. I love Herbert as a player, but God, his weapons are just brutal. Even though I love Ladd as a player too, and he's coming along, and both of them are going to be tricky decisions this week. Look, I think if you want to go for that sneaky DFS stack, I actually think Herbert and Ladd are a lovely DFS stack this week. They're probably going to be cheap. I really like the matchup. I think Ladd is a very good football player. He can just only do so much with the low passing volume on the team. But tricky decisions for us. Again, in redraft, I don't know how many leagues you're really rolling these guys out for, but I think Ladd's a perfectly reasonable flex if you need him out there. And again, depending on what your rosters look like, if you came up with a Jaden Daniels injury and your wire's really bare, I actually think Herbert's a perfectly fine start this week. And then Joshua Palmer with the DFS tag. The Saints hemorrhage yards, man. Really bad. They let teams throw all over them, run all over them. And Palmer actually had his best game of the year last year. It looks like Quentin Johnston might miss this week. I actually love him as a cheap dude. If he's like $3,800 on DraftKings, which he may be, like $3,800 to $4,200 in that range, that's an awesome start, man. Again, talk about a sneaky stack. If you want to go super sneaky stack, Herbert Palmer might be a really interesting stack to look at. It's kind of where we're at. Kind of a boring game, kind of boring rosters to be rostering these guys from. Nah.
Yeah. At least my theory with J.K. Dobbins, right? And the reason I fought so hard for him to be a start, I get there's the injury history with the Achilles and how people will drop off after a given number of weeks, right? To me, this Chargers team with Greg Roman and Jim Harbaugh, what they want to do when they're up big in a game, which I think they will be here, I don't think this will be close, is they just want to pound the rock and make the clock go by quick, right? They just want to shorten the game, and I think this is a spot where J.K. Dobbins gets like 25, 26 touches here. I think he's going to be a volume monster in this one against a Saints defense that just has given up, really. This entire Saints team just feels like they've given up at this point after the fast start. I mean, I don't know. There's things to like about this team, right? Like I like Olave, I like Kamara, I like Clint Kubiak, but their cap is so screwed. They have so many just old or bad players that it's just tough sledding for them. Chargers big here. All right, next we got the Buffalo Bills going into Seattle to play the Seahawks, my favorite team. The Bills have an implied team total of 25.25 points, and the Seahawks have an implied team total of 22.5 points. For the Bills, we are starting Josh Allen, James Cook, and Amari Cooper. In a tricky decisioning, Dalton Kincaid, new addition to the STDs, Khalil Shakir, and Keon Coleman. Then for the Seahawks, we're starting Kenneth Walker and we're starting Lockett, surprisingly, if DK sits out this one. If DK plays, he's going to be a start. It just is what it is with him at this point. And then we're going to STD, Geno Smith, Jackson Smith, the Jigba, and Noah Fant. So let's start with the Bills first, I suppose. Listen, man, this Seahawks team, they got a good win last week against the Atlanta Falcons. They just traded for Ernest Jones. They got Boye Mafe back. Byron Murphy was back. Don't buy it. Don't buy this team being legitimate in any way, shape, or form. Josh Allen's a good player. I think he might be the only quarterback in the NFL this year without a pick. He has 12 touchdowns, 0 interceptions on the year. I get it's looked weird the past couple weeks. He's had some inefficiencies. He's had some slow starts, but this is a gettable matchup, and you're not really thinking about sitting him here. Same with James Cook, man. He has just quietly been the most reliable other piece on the Buffalo Bills. It was Diggs for so long. It was always Josh Allen going out there trying to play hero ball. With Joe Brady taking over the offense, they've become a running back centric team. They're Josh Allen go out and make great plays and will hand the ball off to James Cook sometimes. So we like him here. And then Amari Cooper. The Bills went and got him for a reason. Amari Cooper is still a good football player in theory. I think he is still. This Bills team has really just been struggling to have anybody currently on their roster step up as a pass catcher. It seems like they're going to want to feed him. I think this could be a big one for him here in a matchup that, if it breaks right, could be a high scoring one. Then Kincaid is a tricky decision. This one is tough, right? Because Kincaid was going in the fifth or sixth round of drafts, right? Like, in my opinion, he was one of my favorite tight ends in the offseason. I thought he had tight end one overall upside, right? But the fact he hasn't been over 10 points in the last like month, it's just kind of been he hasn't really had spike weeks either. It's just kind of been disappointing all the way through. And I think at this point you just have to adjust your priors on what this Bills offense is. They are not just a drop back 50 times Josh Allen team anymore, and he's just not getting it done as a tight end one. So tricky decision in the sense that if you have a better option, go ahead and do it. I don't have Kincaid as a locked in, do not move from your starting lineup guy anymore. Khalil Shakir, I think that Amari Cooper coming to town might actually be a good thing for him. He was effectively working as the wide receiver one, or I guess as close as you could call a Bills wide receiver one for the first part of this season. But with Cooper coming to town and taking over the X role, like Shakir should be able to move into the slot here, which is where he's more comfortable being in. He's a big yak guy, get him the ball in space, let him make a play. He's a fast guy. I mean, he's attached to Josh Allen, right? That's a good thing. And then Keon Coleman, he's running routes, but he just hasn't been efficient with it. You always have the possibility that he gets in the end zone. You have the possibility that he makes a nice contested catch against this subpar Seahawks defense. But he's my least favorite out of the three for the tricky decisions. I lean towards sit for him. For the Seahawks, Ken Walker has been getting his flowers in the fantasy community. This week on Underdog's positional ranking show, they had Ken Walker as the running back one overall this week because the Bills are bad at rush defense, and Ken Walker has been getting there as a fantasy asset. Am I that bullish on him? Absolutely not. But this is the year I gave up the Sharps dream, and I said, you know what, Ken Walker's good at football. I like him. I like the matchup. And quite frankly, I think he's a much better weapon than DK personally. I think DK has his flaws. I don't think he's that good, but this is a no-brainer here. It's got to feel good if you drafted a fourth or fifth round Ken Walker. Tyler Lockett is actually going to be our preferred pass catcher here if DK misses. The reason being is that he's just been more consistent in terms of fantasy production over the year. JSN has had weeks where he's popped up as a target monster, the light skinned Cooper Cup, right? But he's been really inefficient with his opportunity. And Lockett, he's an old dog, but he's still there, right? He's still getting in the end zone sometimes. Actually, on my best ball roster, Tyler Lockett is my wide receiver two now. He just barely passed Rashee Rice last week. That's the state of my wide receiver room. But yeah, you could do worse than him this week. I think that they're gonna try and run the ball a little bit more. So he's not a smash start for me. He's not inside my top 24, but flex consideration for sure for Lockett. And then for the STDs, Gino, this is just a pretty good pass defense in the Buffalo Bills. I think the Seahawks are gonna probably be trailing here and trying to catch a lead. And when the Seahawks are chasing a lead, Geno Smith is liable to drop back 40 to 50 times a game. He hasn't been efficient in those game scripts, but he's throwing enough and getting enough yards to get you anywhere from 18 to 20. That's kind of my projection this week for him. JSN, this is just the same thing I was talking about earlier. He's been getting targets. He just hasn't been efficient with them. But if your quarterback is going to be dropping back 50 times, he's worth at least consideration for a flex spot. And same with Noah Fant. Tight ends dry, 50 pass attempts per game. Why not? It's at least worth a shot.
All right. A spread that really surprised me, but that's where we're at. Bears with an implied team total of 23. Commanders with an implied team total of 20.5. I don't know if Vegas is factoring in that Jaden might still play. I would be surprised if they are. He's DNP'd all week. And if it's Mariota going, I don't think the spread should be 2.5 points on this game, but something to keep an eye on as the week progresses. The Bears, look, they are coming into their own. All of a sudden, Caleb's efficiency and EPA per play is exploding. He's starting to really look like the guy we thought we were getting in the NFL. And on that, right, they're coming out of a bye. So you always look for the rookie bump out of the bye, which affects two fantasy assets in this offense, but also like Caleb is now sat with his offensive coordinator, who is not a good offensive coordinator, right? To be fair, but they've now sat together for 2 weeks without worrying about a game, A, to plan for this team specifically, but B, what do you like, Caleb? What are you getting into? What are you seeing that really makes you tick? They've broken down the film. They've seen what he does well, what he doesn't do well. You can't always adjust that on the fly when you have like 4 days of practice in between some of these games, right? You can in 2 weeks, and that's why we typically see a rookie bump, and rookies really need that sort of more tailored. It's not a one size fits all approach when you don't have the full toolkit, right? I am expecting, and I would assume Ted is expecting, Caleb should have a wonderful rest of the season, man. His schedule is amazing. The receiver schedule is amazing. I think it's wheels up. I expect him to smash this week. He's a fantastic start. There are very few, if you're talking about 2 QB rosters, there are very few guys that I'm going to be starting Caleb over. Obviously, you have, your 6 or 8 locked in top guys, but beyond that, Caleb's an awesome start, man. And Swift, look, I love the player. I'm actually really happy to see him get going, and he has been a full-blown blossoming starter for the last month now. Start him every week, really. Komet is currently the tight end 3 in overall fantasy points this year. I cannot believe that. I am shocked about it. But you're not sitting the tight end 3. I'm sorry, you got to keep starting him. There are very few guys I'm starting him over. If somehow he's still on waivers, get him off there. And then DJ Moore. Awesome spot for DJ. Again, right? Him and Caleb have been throwing for 2 weeks now, getting on the same page and learning each other, right? There were those first 2 weeks where DJ Moore was actually looking so angry and pointing to the backup quarterback saying, I need you out there, because Caleb was screwing him over so badly. That does not look like the case anymore, right? Their chemistry looks really good. Their reads look really good together. I don't know if you guys saw that clip of Caleb throwing the dirt in the air or spraying the water bottle in the air to test the wind before he hit DJ Moore on that 40-yard bomb in heavy wind. He talked to DJ about it. Really cool clip. They're awesome, man. I think those 4 guys are weekly starters until proven otherwise, and I think this week they go off. Sort of tricky decision is going to be Allen. He saw enough volume last week that I think he's on the low end flex radar. I wouldn't feel good about starting him, but when a matchup like this, I think you're perfectly reasonable to go. Now, we just talked about the rookie bump. We just talked about their good receiver schedule, and traditionally first round receivers taken in the top 10 have an amazing second half of the year. I actually do think that's incoming for Odunze. Okay. He's going to be a sit this week because I think if Mariota goes, they're going to get such a lead. You're looking at a rush-heavy game where they don't need to sit there and air it out. They're perfectly happy to run the ball if they're able to. They're perfectly happy to sit there and hit short, safe routes if they're able to. To me, that profile is much more like Komet and Keenan Allen getting work. But I do think by the end of the year, we're going to see Odunze sliding into the tricky decision, maybe even the start category if he overtakes Keenan. For now, I would really rather not start him this week. He hasn't been over in double-digit fantasy points in like 3 to 4 weeks. For the Commanders, if it's Mariota and if it's not Jaden Daniels, very straightforward. Start Brian Robinson Jr. In my opinion, he's an RB1 that's disguised as an RB2. I love the guy as a fantasy asset. I actually like him as a football player too. You're sitting everyone else besides Scary Terry, who's our sort of tricky decision. I was going to say to sit Terry, but Ted rightly pointed out he had 9 targets, 6 receptions, 68 yards this week, I believe, or 60 yards, something along those lines.
97 yards last week.
Okay,
with Marcus
okay,
Mariota. Yeah.
Okay. So what did he have? 9, 6, 97, believe? Okay. Look, Terry is the man. I love Terry, and nobody knows playing with dog shit quarterbacks like Terry McLaurin. So, yeah. Just temper your expectations. So, I would be surprised if you get like a 13, 14-point week out of him. And this is a really good secondary. The Bears have been a really, really good defense. So I would, be judicious about your decisions when you're looking through your bench. You did a really good job drafting if you're in a position to bench Terry McLaurin. I know a lot of people simply aren't going to be. That's not very realistic. And I think he's a perfectly reasonable start, but I would also don't expect the last few weeks we've gotten out of Terry have been really special. And I think that's what you can expect for the rest of the year with Jaden. I just think this week will probably be his worst week of the year for the rest of the year.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I guess I have a couple Bears hot takes, I guess. For me personally, I'm surprised I didn't see this. I would have brought it up To me, Cole Kmet's a tricky decision. I'm not. I get that he's the tight end 3 on the year, but I think he had like 25 points in London against the Jaguars when DJ Moore had an eye poke and was out for like a quarter and a half. Like, I don't a 25-point like tight end game will like slide you up like 10 spots, bro. I don't know. To me, there's just too many guys on this Bears team, and like long term, right? I think that Odunze is probably gonna see more post by rookie bump here. Like I almost like Odunze better than Keenan this week because Keenan got both in the end zone twice on the eye poke with DJ Moore, right? Like, so I guess I would kind of shift around those Bears pieces a little bit, but it is ambiguous, right? They're like the Walmart Lions or 49ers team where it's like they got a lot of weapons. Like, who gets it this week? Just something to be aware of there. And then I got nothing on the Commanders without Jaden, man. It's just they miss him a lot. Here's a question: how many points do you think Jaden's worth to the spread? If Jaden was playing in this game, do you think the Bears are favored at all? Even
Yeah, I mean, I would probably just flip it. I think it would be Bears 20.5, Commanders 23. 2.5,
really,
I would give them minus 2.5 at home.
I would think
So
the
I'd say,
Commanders would be favorites with Jaden in this
yeah,
game.
yeah, yeah.
Actually,
I'm saying
yeah.
I would flip it. So I would
Oh
have the
yeah.
Commanders team total at 23, Bears at 20, 2.5 spread for the Commanders. But that's pretty crazy to say. Is Jaden worth a 5-point adjustment to the spread? But to me, I also think Mariota's awful. Like, I don't know why when he took on the field, I went, Mariota's still a thing. So like that's a big reason why is I think you're going from no quarterback to a quarterback. So yeah, I think that's worth 5 points. I would have it 23, 2.5 point spread for the Commanders.
Fair enough. All right. Oh, one more thing before we move on. I get that the Commanders have had good offensive or defensive performances the past couple weeks. They held the Panthers to 7. I believe they held the Cardinals to like 14 points. There was another team they kind of shut down. Don't buy into that. This Commanders defense is terrible. This is a Bears smash spot here. I wouldn't be shocked to see this overhit, actually. It might be a good bet for the gambling show. All right, next we got the Carolina Panthers going into Denver to play the Broncos. My second team, the Carolina Panthers, I would like to renounce them this week. Actually, for 1 week only, I'm going to be looking for a different second team. I will be back on them next week, but this week I am out. They have an implied team total of 16 points. The Broncos have an implied team total of 25.5 points. For the Panthers, we are only tricky decisioning Chuba Hubbard, and we're sitting everybody else you could possibly think of. Then for the Broncos, we're starting Bo Nix, we're starting Cortland Sutton, and we're starting Javonte Williams, and then we're sitting everyone else. So let's start with the Panthers here. This one's easy. Andy Dalton this week got in a car crash with his wife and 3 kids, and sprained his thumb. And because of his sprained thumb, he is unable to play this week, which means we are getting Bryce Young back. And not only are we getting Bryce Young back, we are getting Bryce Young back against a defense that has been outperforming and playing amazing football. This is bad news for my Carolina Panthers. This is bad news for all of you fantasy managers out there who were smart and bought these discounted Panthers players. I know Chuba Hubbard has been one of the best fantasy guys to have this year. Been one of the best draft picks, it feels like, to have on your roster. Man, I would not be shocked to see under 10 points here. I would not be shocked to see a Broncos drubbing of the poor Carolina Panthers here with Bryce Young. The fact of the matter is he's like 5'10 and is not a football player. He does not have a football player's body. He does not have a football player's arm. He does not have a football player's read of the game or competitiveness. He just is. I don't. It's shocking to me he ever won overall. I don't know if his confidence just completely left him when he left Alabama, but the kid's not going to be in the NFL much longer, right? The NFL stands for not for long, and Bryce Young, you're on the clock, brother. For the Broncos, Bo Nix, he's looked okay. He's looked okay. Colin seems to think he's better than Brock Purdy. He's not, but this is one of the best matchups in the NFL right now. The Panthers defense, they weren't very good to begin with, and now they're banged up. He's worth at least a start here. Cortland Sutton, he had a goose egg last week in an absolute blowout of the New Orleans Saints. I think that's a weird game script thing. The fact of the matter is he is the number one option in the passing game on the Denver Broncos. And if you think the Broncos score points here and have success in the air, which I think is probably a fair bet, get Cortland Sutton in there. I mean, you could do worse. And then Javonte Williams, he had 25 points last week. It was like right as the fantasy community was out on him as a whole, he reminded us all that he can still score some points sometimes. I don't think he's anywhere close to the player he was before he had the terrible triad in his knee. But man, it's the Carolina Panthers. They are like last year we bullied the Bears like this. This year I think we can bully the Carolina Panthers defense like this. At least the Panthers though, they were fun when they had an offense that worked, but this offense is not going to work with Bryce Young. I will be depressed watching this. Usually I have a Panthers game on every single week because there are so many fantasy implications for me. Not this week, man. It's just going to be sad. Any thoughts on this one, Yanni? You stoked to see Bryce Young playing again?
No, no. It seems like a nice guy, not a fan of the player. Yeah, and just look for those of you guys that lost Jaden Daniels this week. I think Nix is a perfectly reasonable streamer. I actually think he should get 20, 22 points. So okay, God, man, there's going to be some bad football this week. It's not. I don't think it's going to be a good week. The watchability, I think, is going to be very low. Chiefs 25.5 point implied team total in at the Raiders at 16 points. We know how it works with the Raiders in Vegas. Should basically be a Chiefs home game with the way those fans are, with the way they travel. And look, Mahomes, he actually got dropped in a league I was in, which started a whole shitstorm this year, with all the guys. I mean, is that like a controversial thing to do? I didn't look who else the guy is starting. I think he had like Baker Mayfield. Well, I'm probably starting Baker Mayfield over Mahomes every week they're healthy. So he wanted the roster spot. He moved on. I don't know. It's kind of crazy, right? But he has simply not been a QB1 since like week 10, 12 last year. He's got more interceptions than he has touchdowns this year. It's absolutely wild that they keep winning the way they are. It's because situationally he's incredible. And actually they've been pounding the hell out of the football, right? And their defense has been playing really well. So most weeks he's actually going to be either a tricky decision or an outright sit in my book. But this week with the Raiders, I think you're perfectly fine starting him. I think he's a good start. Again, if you need a fill in for Jaden Daniels and people actually cut him, go ahead and grab Mahomes. And then Kareem Hunt. Kareem Hunt has been getting workhorsed. Maybe he's a bit of a sell high. Maybe he's a bit overrated, but I don't think this week. I think this week he's going to absolutely crush the Raiders. The game script should be amazing. I wouldn't be surprised to see him get 20 plus touches. I don't care if CEH comes back. I don't care if Carson Steele eats into his work. They fundamentally trust Hunt the most. Even though Pacheco is on his way back, and that will erase Hunt's value. Until that happens, I'm starting him every week with confidence, especially in matchups like this. And then Kelsey and Worthy. Worthy's seen a 30% target share. Kelsey's had a rough year and month, and I don't even know what to make of it. To me, it looks like they're just not willing to use him until the playoffs. It looks like if they're going to get him 10 or 12 targets, that's going to come. And, when they need to cinch up the number one seed, when they need to go to the playoffs and start working it, I think they're not. Yeah, I mean, I see the backup tight end getting catches all the time. I just don't think they have any reason to workhorse him. But again, in this matchup this week, you're going to start him. Worthy's been really interesting. He has horrific ratings against press coverage. So as it turns out, even though he is incredibly fast, the reason we're not really seeing him, I saw this joke about Andy Reid won't give him the basic routes because he doesn't trust him or whatever. It was going around Twitter this week. Well, he can't really run slants and curls and drags because if he gets bumped on the line of scrimmage, he's not getting open. He cannot handle press coverage at all. He's too small. Now he can grow into that. That can change. It's sort of interesting. I would expect that to get better as the year goes on. It's just so far he's got a massive target share. He's not doing a lot with it. But I do think this week he's going to have a really big week. And then your sit is going to be Hopkins. Hopkins will not be a sit going forward. Okay. He will not be. I think he's liable to have the biggest, like a 20+% target share on this team once he gets integrated. But normally that takes a week or two for the offense to really use them. Right. So he's a sit this week. But going forward, man, Hopkins is wonderful. You have to be stoked to have him on your roster. I actually was rolling around, tossing and turning at like 4:30 in the morning. I wasn't able to get to sleep last night. I was on Twitter, and the Adam Schefter update hit, and I'm like, okay, cool. Added him on 6 rosters at 4:30 in the morning. And then for the Raiders, Brock Bowers. Brock Bowers is closing in on Puka Nakua's rookie receiving record for receptions. Absolutely incredible from the kid. He is the bright shining spot in this dumpster fire of a franchise and the Raiders. Look, I am not starting any Raider player with confidence against a good defense. Absolutely none of them under any circumstances whatsoever. I know Madison has had a few good weeks in a row. This is the team allowing the fewest fantasy points to running backs in the NFL. The Ravens are the number one rushing defense, but fewest fantasy points is the Chiefs. So do not start Madison this week. I don't know if Zamir White's back. Even if he's back or not, I don't care. I'm not starting him. Don't start Jacoby Myers. Don't start Minshew. Roll Bowers out there. Don't touch the rest.
To be fair, the Las Vegas Raiders are the last team to beat the Kansas City Chiefs in the regular season. So we'll see, man. When you get a spread that's nice and big like this, 9.5 points to the Raiders, home divisional dog, there might be a pick. There might be a pick on this game for the old gambling show, but
I dare you to do that.
I don't think that the Raiders will win this game. But you know what? I think Gardner Minshew might look good. All right, next. Oh boy, I got this one. I got this one. Okay, the Cowboys are coming into Levi's to play the 49ers. The Cowboys have an implied team total of 20.5 points, and the 49ers have an implied team total of 25 points. This is got to be the matchup of the two most just depressed fan bases. I think there's going to be a lot of sad people in the arena, whether or not they're wearing a Cowboys jersey or a Niners jersey. Both of these teams cannot feel good about how their season is gone. I think they're both on the brink here. I think if the Cowboys lose, it's Jover completely. We're on McCarthy fire watch. If the Niners lose this one, I think that the fan base might implode in on itself. It's bad vibes. This is a must win for both teams here. For the Cowboys, we're starting Dak, we're starting CD, we're starting Rico Dowdle, and we're starting Fergalicious, and we're tricky decisioning Tolbert. Then for the Niners, we're starting Brock Purdy, Jordan Mason, Ricky Pearsall. Might I remind you, 6 weeks ago he was shot in the chest, and the doctor said 98 out of 100 times that happens, the person dies. And then George Kittle, if he goes, he's trending towards not going, by the way. We're sitting Debo if he goes, and then we're tricky decisioning Jacob Cowing. So let's start with the Cowboys first. Let's just get this one over with. Listen, man, Dak and CD, it's what this team does. The team is structured around Dak and CD connection. They want to throw the ball all the time. CD is a perfectly fine football player. Dak in the right spots is a great quarterback. There's other spots where you scratch your head and say, "What was that throw?" Right with Dak, but roll him out here. I mean, it's not a great matchup, but there's reason to believe the Cowboys will be in this football game. Rico Dowdle, he looked pretty good against the Pittsburgh Steelers on Sunday night. The Cowboys are coming off a bye. I wouldn't be shocked to see him get more involved in the offense here. He kind of pulled away there before the bye as clearly the RB1. He is the most talented running back on this team. It's just a question to me of how much philosophically the offense wants to get him involved. He's not like a top 10 running back in the league or anything, right? But he's good enough in a offense that should be at least scoring points this year, fire him up. And same with Ferguson, right? He kind of acts as the second pass catcher on the team after CD for the most part. Jalen Tolbert has had a couple spike weeks here. That's why he's in tricky decision. But we just trust Ferguson a little bit more at a position that is not as deep as wide receiver. Then for the 49ers, it's a mess. It's a mess. Listen, I've been optimistic about this team all year. I've been the number one supporter and don't worry about it Niners fan there is. I called other Niners fans soft. I have not been nice to our friend Yanni, who has been saying this Niners team is not a good football team. Listen, man, if you're missing the amount of playmakers on your team like the Niners are, they're just not a good football team right now. And it's going to be up to Brock Purdy to carry the load here. The good news is this Cowboys defense has not been playing well. They are not the same Cowboys defense from the past years. Purdy has been playing well. Obviously, that game against Kansas City was terrible. It was just an awful performance from him all the way around. I think other than like his potentially concussed games, that was by far the worst game on his resume. But he's going to need to step up here. I think he can do it. I think this is like a make or break game for the kid, right? Like he needs it here. This is a must win for a team that is holding on for dear life to their playoff hopes. Same with Jordan Mason. He played last week after the AC joint sprain against the Seahawks. He was okay. The Chiefs' rush defense is really good, though. The Cowboys can be run all over. They are undersized. All of the things we've told you about the Cowboys all year are still the same, right? They are built to get a lead and pass rush you. If the Niners can jump out to a lead and play bully ball and run the ball at them, they're undersized and they won't be able to stop it. And Jordan Mason, he's a tough runner. He's going to get those extra yards. We call him Baby Lynch for a reason. If this game goes well for the Niners, it's going to be a big Jordan Mason game. Ricky Pearsall, man, he's the last healthy body left in the Niners passing game. And if you believe that Brock Purdy will have success and the Niners will have success here, there's a good chance it's Slick Rick. Even though to me he didn't look as good last week against the Chiefs as I thought he would. But you got to give the kid a break, right? He's a rookie coming off being shot. Even in training camp, he was picking up injuries, so he just hasn't had the snaps. He hasn't had the reps. I think he will get better as time goes on, and if JJ and Debo are out, right? Like I think he'll be the first read. Um, Debo, he was in the hospital this week with pneumonia. He got out, I believe, yesterday or this morning. I forgot exactly what the day was. But Shanahan said there's a chance that Debo plays this week. I think Debo knows, and I think Shanny knows that hey, we need to win this game, right? I think the Niners know they cannot go into the bye week 3-5 here. I think Debo is going to try his best to be out there. He's a locker room leader. The guys look up to him. He's a team captain. He is the heart and soul of the team. So I think he'll try and get out there. Is like a almost emotional boost, but I don't see it this week with him being ill. His physicality is like the cornerstone of his game. I just don't see how he can be in the hospital from pneumonia on Monday and come out and have a meaningful, impactful game here. I would wait till next week, but I still like Devo as a fantasy option the rest of the year. I still love him as a player. He's way better than Brandon Ayuk. Then Jacob Cowing, tricky decision. This one is interesting, and I would personally not be shocked to see Cowing have a better game here than Ricky Pearsall. But I think that it makes more sense to put him as a tricky decision. Right now, I think he's like the wide receiver 5 on the depth chart, but he has been here the entire year. He hasn't been getting run in the offense, but at least he's been in training camp the entire time. He's been getting on the field. He is a deep threat. He's a fast player. He runs a 4.3. He actually had a walk-in touchdown if Brock had hit him against the Chiefs. Brock underthrew it a little bit. It was a 50-yard gain instead. He's kind of your deep threat guy. I like him as a player. If you have faith in this Niners team, if you have faith in Brock Purdy being able to do it without the big dogs, Jacob Cowing is as good of a shout as any of them. Any thoughts on this one, Yanni? Do you think I was fair in my Niners assessment?
Yeah, I mean, so just the Debo brief fantasy, then a little football aspect. The Debo thing. We've seen Debo do the decoy role before, like way more than once. He gets out there and he's on the field, but he's not getting touches or usage. His O2 levels dropped to the point where he was hospitalized for fluid in his lungs. Some people that might be 2 weeks in the hospital. He's such a beast. He got out in a day. Great. I cannot start him. I in no way can I put him on the field this week, and I have him on one of my best rosters as Debo, and I'm gonna take the chances with whomever else I have on my bench. The Pearsall Cowing split. Cowing actually had some sick routes that Brock didn't see him on during the game. So Cowing actually is a really polished route runner. He looks really good. He actually looks very pro ready to me in terms of his route tree. I think for DFS, dude, oh my God, he's a wonderful play. It's more just about what is the usage going to look like. Pearsall, they're putting in the slot and they're having him run those routes where he reads the different zones and slots in between the zones, those layered throws that Brock is so good at. I just think it's going to be a lot easier for Pearsall and Brock to manufacture touches between one another. And he actually looked like he had pretty good yak. He had pretty good possession receiving. He took a shot from a safety over the middle on one of those plays. He's just, yeah, I think I actually am really happy with how both the rookies look. And I think they're both going to find their place in fantasy this week, especially because I think they are going to be the receiver 1 or 2. Debo might be out there. I don't think he's getting used. So just a brief Brock Purdy note, because I have seen So much Brock Purdy bashing on social media this week. John Middlecoff's out there saying under no circumstances can you extend Brock after this season based on the game last week. I saw trade Purdy takes. The anonymous NFL exec says the 49ers need to trade Purdy now. I've seen people photoshopping college quarterbacks in Purdy jerseys. There is a known malcontent in the 49ers media named Grant Cohen who said he's never seen a ripping like Kyle gave to Brock in front of his locker room for 10 minutes after the game. I don't even think that's true, right? Okay, so one thing that I would say about, look, he's played 28 games. He's had 2 to 3 bad games in 28 games. In those 28 games, he has made it to 2 championships in the Super Bowl. And generally speaking, as the challenges have gotten bigger, Brock Purdy's gotten bigger too. You're allowed to have 2 or 3 bad games in 28 games, dude. I mean, he had his first real offseason this offseason. He suffered a season-ending injury before that. Like, the kid is a very good football player. I think you're absolutely crazy if you're doubting him. And even for fantasy, by the way, I would expect him to have a really big game this week. He's shown you he has a little bit of rushing upside this year. He's shown you he's nice and efficient. And if they get this red zone offense worked out, he's looking at, like, being a low-end QB1 to mid-range QB1 rest of the season. Don't panic about Brock. Don't panic as a Niners fan. And the one thing I am sure about of the Niners this year is I think they have a legitimate quarterback that can win a Super Bowl. But these are the games where you're going to need to see it.
Yeah. This is all your chips are on the table moment, I think, for this 49ers team. They need this one badly, desperately.
Okay, you know what's funny? I keep getting the Giants because I keep saying the phrase, my second team, the Giants. But hey, that's wonderful, man. All right, my second team, the New York Giants, implied team total of 15, going in against the Steelers with an implied team total of 21.5. Little surprised to see the low implied team total on the Giants this year. Their actually offense is totally healthy going into this week. They have not been healthy all year. But even though that is the case, this is a tough defense. This is a battering defense. We're starting Neighbors, but we're sitting the rest, man. The Wan'Dale Robinson PPR scam, I don't know about this week, man. I really don't. You sort of had, Neighbors, I hope I don't need to explain. You're starting Neighbors every week. But and then you sort of have this weird dynamic where Singletary was really good when he was getting 70-75% of the work in the offense. Tyrone Tracy Jr. was really good when he was getting 60 to 70% of the work in the offense. If you have one guy getting that workhorse role in there, he's actually been really good, and I would start away. Totally recommend it. The problem is last week we saw this gross amalgamation of the two of them. They ate off each other's plates to the point where, like, they were both gross starts. That is the worst case scenario for fantasy owners. I only took one Devin Singletary share this year, but I was actually really happy I did based on the first few weeks. Then I put in Tyrone Tracy when he was out. Then I put Devin Singletary back in when Tyrone Tracy, or when he came back. And then it was like, oh God, now I don't know what to do with either one of them. What I would say is Tyrone Tracy's younger. He's a little more explosive. He's just a little beefier of a player. I would maybe lean toward him getting the work toward the end of the year, but Singletary is also Dayball's guy. They have the whole nickname for him. He's really good in the passing game. For now, I would just say try to hold on to one player if you have him on your roster. I wouldn't be cutting Tracy. I wouldn't be cutting Singletary. But if one of them doesn't pull ahead, they're both going to basically be sits or very situational starts for us. And then for the Steelers, Najee and Pickens, no explanation really needed, even though this is a good defense. Najee's seeing 20 to 25 touches a game. He's had 2 really nice games the last 2 weeks. If he's getting volume like that, that is rarefied air in the fantasy community, even though Jaylen Warren came back last week and ate into the snap share significantly and actually split snaps with him. Najee's still getting work, man. And with Russell Wilson in there, you should see a lot more of the traditional passing game and a lot more checkdowns. We'll see if Warren continues to eat into his work. We'll see if the game script goes negative. Does Najee get washed out of the game? But this should not be a game where they're going negative. It should be neutral or positive for the rush game. So you're starting him. Pickens. Pickens looked happy as hell with Russell Wilson as his quarterback, man. I know they kept talking about it on the broadcast. I guess maybe I didn't really think about it. The degree to which a moon ball really matters for a receiver like Pickens, right? Russell throws with that nice trajectory, whereas Fields likes the line drive balls. I actually did notice a difference in that, right? In the Pickens plays of being able to go up and get the ball, high point the ball, get it in the end zone. And it seems like Russell has to know on some level, Pickens was clearly malcontent with Justin Fields. Clearly there was an issue of the most talented player on the offense was not getting along with his quarterback. So on some level, Russell Wilson has to know that one of the strongest leverage points he could possibly have in the team right now is if George Pickens goes off and he's happy and he's getting the most out of him. And you saw what happened, the increase in their passing yards, the increase in the down the field play calls, all that stuff. I think to me they're aligned in a way both in terms of their skills and their needs for one another that I think Pickens is a start so long as Russell Wilson's in there, and not just a start. I think he's a start with some real upside. He could have had a second touchdown last week, would have been looking at like a 25-30 point game. So yeah, start them both. Me and Ted went back and forth. Is Mr. Unlimited a start or a tricky decision? I can't even say it, man. That video's horrific.
Unlimited.
Oh my god, dude. Uh, so kind of throw off my train of thought. Now I'm thinking of the Subway commercial too. Uh, so look, man, it's just weird with Russell Wilson. He had 24 points last week, though, and the issue is that the Steelers' right tackle is horrid. I think he might be the worst right tackle in the league. He's right up there with Colton McKivitz, and Russell got lit up a few times last week. So if the Giants are able to go in there and control the line of scrimmage and stop the run, and Russ has to drop back 30, 35 times, what does that look like? I'm not really sure. He looked really good last week, right? I think if you're just basing off last week, he's maybe closer to a start than a sit. But if you think they're not going to be able to keep him upright, and if you think the Steelers' run game and play action is just not going to work with that really disruptive, the Giants' D-line is like my favorite in football to watch right now. If you think it's more trending that way, Russell's probably a sit, right? But I certainly don't hate it. If you need a streaming quarterback this week, he's okay. I went to look because I had Jaden Daniels in 6 leagues. So I'm sitting there picking through the bargain bin of quarterbacks, and in some leagues he might be the best guy on the board, unfortunately. So, but I think he's okay. I think he's just an okay start this week. And then Warren and Muth. Muth should probably be added, I think, off wires. I still saw him on most of my waiver wires this week. If George Kittle goes down, that's going to be someone that I'm certainly going to be looking at streaming. He had that sick catch, that one-handed-ish grab, dive and grab. Again, just because of the nature of the tight end position and because Russell Wilson does traditionally like his little safety blanket with tight end, I think he should probably be added. I think if you need to stream someone for George Kittle this week, if he doesn't go, perfectly reasonable streamer. And then just Warren's work took a serious uptick. If they go into a negative game script here, which doesn't seem likely, he should get the passing reps. I think Warren, similar to the Bucky Irving White breakdown, probably a guy you want more in those negative game scripts than when they have a lead.
I've got a couple things on this. Make no mistake, Mr. Unlimited is fucking ass. Like, he is not a good quarterback. They ran into the New York Jets, who are just in dysfunction right now, right? I made the mistake of probably being too high on the Jets than I should have been. Guilty as charged. I like Aaron Rodgers, Chico guy, but dude, he got bailed out on so many of those like crazy George Pickens catches, and then the Muth one-handing juggling catch. Like, listen, man, Russ is not a good quarterback. He's just throwing the ball, and I don't know what the luck rankings are, what the Action Network would say about the luck rankings, but I think that Steelers team had just about one of the luckiest games from Russ that was possible. In the first quarter, right? Like, there were, media talking heads like Colin Cowherd was saying this is not going to work. Like, he's just not a good quarterback. I think it's going to come to light here, right? And this New York Giants football team, listen, they have their quarterback issues, but their defense has been playing really well, man. I think that the Steelers, kind of like all season, they're going to struggle to score here. Like, I just don't see them getting over their projected point total, right? 21 and a half. I'm not sure that happens, right? And by extension, I don't know how much I like Pickens this week. I think he's a fine play, right? I wouldn't call him a tricky decision, but I think that this game is going to be more Russell Wilson struggling to hit those deep like moon balls. I think he's going to try and do it, and it's just not going to be working for him. So I think they'll try and pound the rock with Najee a little bit more. This Giants D line is one of the best D lines in football. I think that Najee, who by the way is not a very dynamic runner, is going to get stuffed here. The player I would be looking out for is Jalen Warren. What Russ does when he struggles to move the ball is he does a bunch of dump offs in the flats to his running backs. That's where Jalen Warren should be hitting his best in a pass protection scenario, right? Like, they'll have him on passing downs. I would not be shocked to see Jalen Warren go over 10 points here. I think this is going to be a really weird football game, right? I think it'll be gross. I think it'll be low scoring. I think the Giants
Yeah.
they're on the board to outright win this one. I think that what you saw last week with the Pittsburgh Steelers is still fool's gold. They're still not the football team they think they are. And now they think they're getting Cooper Kupp, too. These Steelers fans are on top of the world, man. Being as delusional as they are, it must feel nice. I would love to be that happy about my bad football team at all times, but we'll see, man. It's not going to last long for him. And that, I guess that we'll just end it on that. End it on a good Steelers bashing. Thank you for making it through the video. I appreciate it. Please like, subscribe, hit the bell. It helps the channel out. Yanni has claimed the question of the day. What is it, my friend?
Inquiring minds want to know, is Jordan Love an overrated quarterback?
That's
Is
a
Jordan
good
Love
one.
overrated? Or is he the guy that the media says? Greg Cosell, the best NFL films guy in the world at the moment, came out and said he thinks Jordan Love is a top 3 to 4 quarterback in the world and does things that very few other quarterbacks can do. Is that true? Is it accurate? It's so cool to me because it is a real debate. That play against the Texans that everyone's sharing where the Green Bay put out, I think they called it like a piss missile, which I was surprised to see the Green Bay official account tweet that out. Where it went through the Texans guy's hand in the end zone and then he caught the ball and the Texans DB retweeted it like it went through my hands, dude. That wasn't a good play. And everyone's saying that's one of the greatest throws in the last decade in the NFL. I want to know, man. It's a hot topic. It is a topic of debate between me and Ted. It's inquiring minds want to know, is Jordan Love overrated? Is he underrated? Is he elite? Is he a Super Bowl winning quarterback potentially? I want to know.
All right. Thank you guys, and we will catch you on Friday for the gambling episode.
Thank you.